The man went through a bizarre experience while walking along a path deep in the forest, a moment that made an entire month of his life flash before his eyes. You won't understand what happened right away, and the events will leave you astonished as you hear them. This is a story I guarantee you've never heard before. Hit the like button, my friend. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really helps me a lot. So let's start today's episode. Peace be upon you, I am Ahmed. So if you have a story you want to share, you can send it to the Instagram account shown on the screen. The first story is from Bakker from the Republic of Chad, a country in Central Africa. Honestly, I don't know how our friend wrote the story in Arabic, and I don't even know the official language of his country. Bakker says, in 2019, I graduated from high school and enrolled in a university in another country called Cameroon to study computer science. I was finally accepted into the university and studied for 3 years, reaching the end of my 3rd year in 2022. The very same year, my younger brother Hamza graduated and joined a university in the same country. He enrolled in the agricultural engineering program at a university in the city of Balabo. So in short, my brother and I were both studying in Cameroon, but at different universities, 220 kilometers apart. At that time, I had built a very close bond with the dean of my brother Hamza's university, almost like we were friends. This was because I had been taking care of the university's study computers, setting them up, maintaining them, and keeping everything organized, all for free. On one of the nights in February, specifically on the 6th, I was studying, preparing myself for a very important exam that was due in a few days. The important exam was on February 14th, and while I was studying, I heard the phone ring. It was a call from my friend, the university dean, where my brother Hamza studies. He said, "Bakker, tomorrow we have an important exam, and there was a malfunction in the computers, and you have to come today and solve the problem because there's no way to postpone the exam." In short, it was a massive catastrophe waiting to happen. It was after the evening prayer, and the train that I could travel with along this distance is not available at such a time. It's only available during the day, so I thought about it several times because I've never traveled to the city of Balabo except by train, but there was nothing I could do. I told the university dean, "Don't worry, I'm on my way, God willing." I kept thinking about how I was going to make the trip, and honestly, I had no option but to drive my own car. Sure, I own a car, but I've never taken it on a trip like this before. Just the usual rides to university, nothing more. So, I pulled up Google Maps, pinned the university in Balabo, and set off into the night. If you've ever heard of Cameroon, you'll know it's basically a land of endless forests. No matter where you go, you're bound to stumble into trees and jungles that stretch forever. Roads are scarce, and losing your way is almost guaranteed. That's why I relied completely on Google Maps, just to avoid getting swallowed by the wilderness. I trekked for half an hour through pouring rain and storms, until something happened you'll soon hear about. Google Maps had suggested a shortcut that was supposed to save me nearly 40 kilometers. Since it was my first time driving through the forest, and in the middle of the night no less, I thought, alright, no matter what happens, I'll just stick to the map. So I took the shortcut, but after a short distance, I realized this path passed right next to a village, inhabited by people lost in primitive beliefs, idol worshippers, more extreme than anything I had imagined. They even stationed guards on the road, forcing every traveler, whether walking or riding, to stop, bow, and pay respect to their idol before being allowed to move on. So, when I finally reached that village, a few men stopped me. Some of them were police officers. They forced me out of my car and ordered me to enter a house and take off my shoes. They said it was to bow and prostrate before their king, most likely some ancient ruler they still worship. They were backward, and I am a Muslim, and I have never bowed to anyone but God. But that day, I had no choice. There was no way I could leave without obeying them, so I stepped into what seemed like the largest house in the village. Through the main entrance, I found the place strangely empty, except for a small sign marking the spot where shoes had to be removed. I saw the place was safe, so I entered the sacred room with my shoes on until I stood before the king statue. As I stared at it, I couldn't help but wonder how these people could bow to such things. I laughed, mocking them in my head, until I actually lifted my foot and planted my shoe on the king's stone hand. The mud from outside had stained the statue, and now his hand was smeared with dirt. Panic struck me. If they noticed, I'd be in serious trouble. So I started wiping the mess off with my own clothes. After all, if their minds allowed them to worship idols, killing me for insulting their idol would be only natural. The smartest thing I could do was whisper a prayer against the devil, clean up the mud, and slip out unseen, like nothing had ever happened. Here's how it went down. While I was cleaning the idol's hand in haste, I realized it was covered entirely in inscriptions. The mud had made the carvings stand out more vividly, yet their meaning remained elusive to me. I walked away, got into my car, and to my relief, they allowed me to leave. I drove off as fast as I could, but that moment marked the beginning of events that to this very day I still cannot explain. Not long after I left the village, the darkness began to deepen, so much that even the car's headlights failed me. It was as if I had driven straight into a solid wall of night. The engine hummed, the dashboard glowed, everything worked as it should, except for the lights. On, off, on again, nothing. I couldn't even see the hood of the car right in front of me. I became more frightened and puzzled, so I stopped the car to see what was going on. Then I saw a very tall, massive, entirely black man with a very ugly appearance. He emerged from the darkness in front of the car. He said he was going to torture me and destroy my life and threatened me directly. The shock hit me so hard I thought my heart would give out. Terror and disbelief flooding me as I stared at the impossible scene. I was frozen. Then he came at me, his hands closing around my throat, his voice thundering with rage. Terror took over. I screamed. I shouted. I broke into hysterical cries. For the first time in my life, I found myself caught in a storm of fear, his screams crashing down on me, my own cries spilling out without thought, without choice. In that instant, God put the adhan in my mouth. I cried and shouted the call to prayer at the top of my lungs. The man's shouting intensified and he began to strangle me even harder. But each time I repeated the adhan, his power slipped away until he fled. I'm not lying. I wet myself from sheer terror after that. I vowed to go straight home, damn the rest. I had been closer to death than I ever want to admit, if not for God's mercy. The words scrawled on the idol that I had tried to read were clearly some kind of spell. What I went through, magic, without a doubt. Once I realized the ugly man was gone, a fragile sense of relief washed over me. I turned the car around, heading the other way down the road just to get back home. All I craved was a breath of air, but instead I felt the strangest, most disturbing sensations, an unbearable tightness, a searing heat pressing at my throat. I pulled over, stumbled out of the car, fighting for breath. And that's when I was hit again, this time by something even stranger, something beyond belief. The place I was supposed to be in was a forest, but what I saw was a completely empty place. No forests, no trees, no roads, just a deserted, lifeless land. There was nothing in the place except for me and my car. I looked left and right just to comprehend where exactly I was, but I began to see a bright white light that filled the entire place, causing my vision to become completely obscured without knowing the source of the light. The entire place turned overwhelmingly white, making it impossible to even open my eyes. So I quickly got into my car, closed the windows, and locked the doors, feeling like my heart was trying to leap out of my chest from fear. In this situation, for more than a minute, the light gradually dimmed until darkness returned everywhere. I stayed looking out from inside the car, but finally I found myself inside a forest, and I was also on a dirt road. I don't know exactly what happened, but all I knew at that time was that I was safe. I said, "That's it. I won't get out of the car until I reach my home." and I grabbed my phone, which was connected to the charging cable. I opened Google Maps to set my home address to go back, and what I saw was as follows. My current location was in a completely different country. According to Google Maps, my current location was in an entirely different country, Congo Brazzaville. Yes, Congo, right in the heart of Africa, bordering Cameroon. But the question that puzzled me was, what brought me to this place? So I said maybe there's an error with the GPS or a mistake in Google Maps. And it's a common issue that happens sometimes. I set my home's location on the map and the distance was enormous. 1,300 kilometers, meaning 25 hours of continuous driving. But how and why and what's the point? I swore I didn't understand anything. I thought maybe it was an error in mobile networks. And I drove, hoping the issue would resolve and Google would read the correct distance. I drove for 10 minutes and virtually everything was orderly and normal. I said for sure Google had an error, so I decided to download another map app to read the distance correctly and accurately, assuming there was a problem with Google Maps. And surprisingly, I didn't have internet. The monthly package I purchased was almost used up, and I entered the company's app to buy another package. But I was shocked for the third time. The date on the phone was the 6th, but in March. What I didn't understand was when I left my house it was the 6th, but in February, which is the second month of the year, and when I decided to return after these events, the date was the 6th, but in March, which is the third month. I tried to correct the date in the phone's settings, but everything was normal and correct. I also tried to call my brother Hamza, but completely failed to do so because I was in a different country without an international roaming service. Meaning, I was in a different country from where I was just minutes ago. And this is the strange part. I started driving on the street, being very puzzled and wondering what exactly had happened and what brought me to this place without understanding or even getting an answer. After 25 relentless hours on the road, I finally arrived at my place of stay in Cameroon. I had also failed my university exam simply because I hadn't even shown up for it, so I tried calling my brother to figure out what really happened, but his phone was out of reach. Everything pointed to one thing: I had skipped an entire month of my life. How? Honestly, I don't even know what I did. I went to my university to report my own disappearance and to sign the absence papers. Then I tried to explain why I'd been gone and requested a temporary leave. But here's the twist. Listen, my friend, when I got there, I was shocked to discover there was already a missing person report under my name. And guess who filed it? My family. They had gone to the police, claiming I had vanished. The police even searched the university, posting the report everywhere I might show up, but they found no trace of me at all. I explained everything to the university and they were stunned. It was so strange, almost impossible to believe. I took some time off and went back to my family to tell them what had happened. That's when I discovered the truth. They had lost all hope of finding me, convinced I'd been kidnapped by a gang, or worse, already dead somewhere. The strangest part? My family actually handed my personal computer over to the police, just so they could trace the GPS device I had secretly installed in my car. I'd hooked up a GPS tracker inside my vehicle, synced it with my computer, and made sure my family knew how it worked. That way, even if I suddenly vanished, at least they could always find me. And the police did track it, except the signal led them to a single spot. It never moved, not even once. That place is the same place where I got out to breathe fresh air and saw the white light. The police searched it again and again on different days, yet they found nothing, just plain solid ground. They even dug deep, convinced that maybe a car was hidden underground. But after several meters, the outcome never changed: emptiness. This eerie incident unfolded for me exactly as I recount it, and I have no answer for it. Still, no matter how I try to explain, the truth was far more bizarre. The second story comes from Yasser, all the way from Sabah Al Ahmad city in Kuwait. You might remember him. He shared with us the tale of the cursed inheritance. That story is still on the channel for anyone who wants to listen, and the link is in the description and pinned comment. This time, Yasser tells us about what happened to his fourth great-grandfather while traveling through the desert. He faced a terrifying situation and was helped, whether by Djinn or by something else. No one can say for sure. His great-grandfather called this mysterious being the man of the blood price. Many of you asked me to tell this story in detail. Yasser once told us during a gathering in our tribe's diwan, with elders and sheikhs present, a story about my great-great-grandfather. It was a tale passed down by sons, uncles, and my father among those who heard it. They said his name was Yasser, a man who wandered far, not for leisure, but for trade, dealing in livestock and leading herds of camels across the desert. For weeks, he would vanish into the vast emptiness, crossing from the Kuwaiti sands into the deserts of Saudi Arabia, never bound to a fixed return. On one such journey, he reached the desert of Hafar al-Batn, and according to his own words, it was just before dawn, in the pitch-black silence of night. On the way, he noticed that the water skin was empty. From what I understood, a water skin is something made of leather, used to store water for long journeys. Yasser went on saying that my great-great-grandfather discovered the water skin had been drained. But the strangest part, it wasn't empty by accident. Someone had deliberately opened it, poured the water out, and then put it back on the camel's back as if nothing had happened. Why? Most likely to let him die of thirst, or to force him to abandon the desert and turn back. My great-grandfather wasn't too concerned after all. Camel milk had always been his lifeline. But the shocking part was this: the camels themselves had no milk to give. After a closer look, he uncovered the unsettling truth. Something else was stealing it before he could drink. The torment that followed was unbearable. Thirst clawed at him until he lost consciousness, only to wake and stumble forward a little, then collapse once more. All he ever got in return were just a few desperate drops. Sadly, he realized that he was doomed either way, for he was stranded in the heart of the desert. Even if he thought of turning back, there was no way he could make it in time. So he sat there in the scorching sands, tears falling from thirst, praying to God Almighty to guide him to a path of salvation. Placing his trust in God, he began the long, grueling journey back toward Kuwait, knowing that endless days of hardship lay ahead before he could ever arrive. And now, listen carefully to what happened next. My grandfather noticed something strange one night as he made his usual journey under the cover of darkness to avoid the burning sun. He saw unusual movement among the camels, something darting quickly, almost hidden within the herd. When he tried to get a closer look, he realized streams of milk were dripping onto the sand, marking the path he had taken. That was when he understood. Something unnatural was at play, something behind the mysterious loss of the camel's milk. Something vile and sinister was deliberately milking the camels, wasting their milk for no reason. My grandfather sensed its presence, catching fleeting glimpses of something darting quickly between the herd. Yet he could neither seize it nor see it clearly. All he ever caught was a shadowy figure, black, shapeless, like long, tangled strands of hair, or perhaps a dense ball of fur. My grandfather was trembling, sank to the floor, utterly surrendered, because he felt death close and sensed something watching him. He kept watching it in turn, thinking only of sitting down and giving up, of placing his fate in God's hands. He raised his hands and began to repeat the holy words. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Then he prayed aloud, I am overpowered. O my Lord, grant me victory. God Almighty has spoken the truth. After he recited this verse, repeating it in utter despair, then, as he lifted his gaze toward the camels, he froze. From within the herd, a figure emerged, a man concealed behind a camel, quietly watching. For the first time, my grandfather truly saw something. Out there, in the endless desert, it couldn't possibly be human. With a burst of courage, he shouted, Peace upon you, whoever you are. Show yourself. Why hide behind the camels? The man emerged slowly and hesitantly. He said to my grandfather, Peace be upon you too. What brings you to the middle of the desert? Are you lost? My grandfather said to him, I am a herder and a traveler roaming the desert. The strange man asked, Then why were you praying? And surely you are a Muslim, right? My grandfather replied, "Yes, I am a Muslim." The strange man said, "Leave this place because you are in a wicked land, and if you stay, you are doomed." My grandfather told the man that he was close to perishing because he had run out of water and the camels had no milk. The strange man said, "Head in this direction and you will find a well, God willing. Drink from the well only, and do not take the water with you. Drink what you need and leave. Do not set up camp beside the well. Peace be upon you." My grandfather said the strange man left him and started walking through the desert while he kept thinking about his words until he concluded that since he had seen the man after praying, surely God had paved a path for his salvation, and this was an opportunity to move forward and return home. The direction of the well coincided with the direction of the route back as well. He said, "I followed the strange man's words and walked in the direction he pointed out. After an exhausting day's journey, I finally stumbled upon an ancient well. It looked as if it had stood for more than 100 years, crumbling and worn with age. Yet deep at its bottom, I could see water shimmering faintly. I tied my water skin to a rope, lowered it into the darkness, and drew up enough to drink. The cool water quenched my thirst, and I couldn't resist storing a little more for the road ahead. Given the long journey ahead and the need for water along the way, and since this well was in the middle of the desert, why not? So he lowered the water skin to fill it with water and saw a golden shimmer at the base of the well, indicating that the entire bottom was gold. He lost control of himself and didn't think about anything else. He immediately leapt into the well to get as much gold as possible, thinking it was at the bottom of the well without considering how he would get out. But the shock was that after he jumped, he found neither gold nor anything but yellow dirt. Just ordinary desert sand having nothing to do with gold. Why did it appear gold to him? He had no idea. But the calamity was that he couldn't get out of the well. Without a rope, no help in sight, he began to hear the camels scream and move chaotically. Afterward, they departed from the well, and he couldn't hear any sound. And he remained in the well from the beginning of the morning until deep into the night, knowing he was doomed in the middle of this well. I couldn't climb out, nor was I anywhere near a village where someone might help me. Exhausted, I looked up and saw the moon directly overhead in the sky. For a brief moment, with no thought of freedom, I simply gazed at its shape. And then, again, I saw him. A figure, black from head to toe. His loose, dark clothes hung heavily as he gripped the edge of the well, watching me, just as he had from behind the herd of camels. Yes, it was the same stranger. This man said, "I told you to drink and leave the place. Do not take the water and do not remain beside the well. Why did you go against my words, knowing that this is a wicked land?" By land, he meant the part of the desert he was within. It might be, for instance, a dwelling for demons. My grandfather fell silent, drained of all strength, until he suddenly felt himself rising, as though being pulled upward out of the well. Moments later, he lost consciousness. He would awaken for fleeting seconds, caught between dream and reality, seeing himself carried through the desert in someone's arms. Then darkness would claim him again. Sometimes he woke to the night, other times to the blazing sun, until finally he opened his eyes to find himself lying on the floor of his own home. The moment he awoke, he questioned his family. How had he returned when his last memory was standing in the vast emptiness of the desert? Their reply chilled him. "By God, Abu Falan, you simply walked into the house, lay down on the ground, and slept. No camels, no sign of your herd. We saw nothing. Only you, asleep until this very moment." What had truly happened in the desert, none of them had the faintest idea. My grandfather once descended into a well, only to be ambushed by the desert ghosts. Creatures not quite human. They stole his herd of camels and left him trapped at the bottom of the well, waiting for death. They had tricked him into believing that gold lay hidden below. But his salvation came from an unlikely source, a righteous Djinn who had once appeared in the dreams of my great-grandfather. In that dream, a mysterious figure revealed himself, saying he had saved my grandfather from a tribe of desert demons. He called himself Sahib al-Dia, which means the man of the blood price, a name he carried after mistakenly killing a Muslim Djinn from his own kin. How he killed him, God knows best. However, he was sentenced to exile in the desert and he had to pay the blood money before being exiled, what he did was that he actually paid the blood money even though he could have escaped to the desert, because in any case, he was exiled. And because of that act, he was given this name. My grandfather was asked to return the favor by providing him a place to live in peace. How exactly my grandfather managed to settle him in the middle of the room's furniture, only God knows. He even handed him the Wi-Fi password so he could join the channel, catch up on past episodes, ring the bell, and share the video to stay tuned for the next ones. Later, he followed me on Instagram to see my life beyond YouTube. I'm Ali Ahmed. Goodbye.